cape.
Welcome, Wargamers, to 2 Plus Tough, and we're going to continue our lore series, which we have not done in quite some time. We're going to pick it back up with Seraphon, which is actually one of our earliest requested lore videos. And I think it really speaks to the heart of Age of Sigmar and the way it was released, and kind of some of the growing pains that it had. The Seraphon army had a rough start, I think. But now that we're in where we are now, as far as a year and a half, almost 2 years out in Age of Sigmar, I think this army has really grown into the setting and become a very interesting part of the world. Now, we need to have a few conversations here before we really dig into Seraphon now, and that is where they were, and a question about mystery. Okay, so stick with me here. Seraphon, in the old world, were known as lizardmen. They were basically an engineered race by a different race called the Old Ones, created with the purpose of what they know as the Great Plan. This was the overarching plan to stop chaos, which obviously failed, and all of these Seraphon dispersed. They carried their leaders, known as the Slon, into their great temples, and the temples lifted off the ground and turned out to be starships. This is actually super important because here's the thing. When the end times happened in 8th edition, the Lizardmen, or now the Seraphon, were the only survivors, right? They're the people who made it out of the catastrophe. So people were really intrigued when the announcement came out that they were going to be released as one of the earliest factions in Age of Sigmar. And because that was kind of our mental connection from 8th edition, right? Like, we don't know what happened to everyone else because the setting was very, very fluid and kind of abstract in the beginning. But we know these guys, right? So let's tail with them, and maybe they'll give us a glimpse into what happened and where we're going and what the world is like and all those kinds of things. Because, like I said, they're the only ones who made it out of the world alive. This puts it into sharp contrast with the fact that Games Workshop decided to kind of rewrite their narrative to be one of mystery. Okay, they are a mysterious race in Age of Sigmar, which is it was kind of hinted at in 8th edition, but the army book gave you enough information. They weren't a total mystery. They weren't foreign as a concept, but they are now. So this brings us into the second conversation we have about mystery. How do authors write something as being mysterious? They actually have the same problem, I think, with Alpha Legion in 40k or 30k if you play either of those systems. And the thing is this. If you give too much information, they're not mysterious. If you don't give enough information, they're not interesting, right? There's nothing to grasp or intrigue you with them. There are a few ways to write mystery. One is the control of information, so little information, lots of information. Another way is misinformation. This is probably the best example is if you've ever seen Batman Dark Knight with the Joker, where he in the movie gives like 3 scenarios as to how he got the scars on his face. We don't actually know. He told us 3 times, but we don't know how he got the scars on his face. Why? Because every story was different. There were different accounts, different settings for each one of them. And so, you can give information, but it's always false. They do that quite a bit. As I referenced Alpha Legion, a lot of the things regarding them, the last line is, but this is a lie. So here's the point I'm bringing up here is they switched gears from being a race that was fairly transparent and understandable to one that is mysterious. This is really unfortunate at the time that it came out because we were so desperate for anything concrete about the Age of Sigmar setting that we had the expectation as people who played 8th edition that this army, when it was announced, it was the first of the old armies to be redone in the Age of Sigmar universe. We were looking for something concrete to relate to, and because they chose the mysterious route, which is cool, it kind of left people with a sour taste in their mouths. Also remember, this is one of the earliest battle tomes to come out, and so it didn't have the battle tome specific, traits and artifacts and things like that. So compared to today's battle tomes, it can see a bit dry and empty. I want to say that I do not think that is accurate. There's a lot of rich lore in this book, but it only works with the context that we have now of the Age of Sigmar universe rather than what we had back then. So, all of those prefaces aside, that was a long preface, but it's super integral to understanding this army and appreciating it. We can take a look at the Seraphon now. Basically, They are the good guy demon army as far as the tabletop goes. Everything in the army except for the Slann is summonable. They can, just like the demons can, they can throw troops pretty far out in their hero phase by deploying them, with the summoning rules. They can raise massive armies with their minds. So that's kind of more the tabletop stuff. Let's talk about how that is represented in the lore. So I said that the lizardmen hopped on their great spaceships and flew off into space to become what we now know as the Seraphon. The only actually living Seraphon are the Slann. These are the sort of robust lizards that sit in the floating chairs. These are some of the universe's most powerful wizards. I mean, they are just like raw power. They can follow, yet also affect celestial events. They draw. We're getting to this a little bit. Almost all their power is based on the universe, the celestial occurrences that happen around them, the way the stars align, the way galaxies move, the way the energies of space itself coalesce. They funnel all of that power and then use it to summon armies. Okay, now that's freaking awesome, right? That means the Slann is like the centerpiece of any good Seraphon army, as far as like a narrative-based army. I'm not a Seraphon aficionado as far as gameplay goes, but narratively speaking, he's gonna be the guy who like just racks up all this entire army from snapping his fingers, and it's legit. So I said the Seraphon are the only living, the Slann are the only living Seraphon, and that is an accurate thing. There are a few points I want to get to at the end with. Here's the deal. There's things that we know for sure, and then there's things that we are kind of questioning. We have multiple answers to. This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about mystery. There's things we know, right? Information that we can gain. And then there's conflicting kind of information within the battle tome, which at the time we thought this is poor writing. And I'd like to say that it's probably not the best writing, but it certainly, I think, exemplifies mystery, if nothing else. So the things that we do know for sure, that the Slann is the living one. He uses starlight and celestial events and occurrences to funnels that energy, and with it he is able to summon the rest of his troops. Now, unlike demons, which are basically an extension of the Chaos God, so bloodletters are a direct extension of Khorne, right? He breaks off a piece of himself, a very minor piece, and creates a bloodletter. The Slann is a little bit different in the sense that he uses energy from the stars, and he remembers what this warrior was like back in the old world, as we now know it, 8th edition, and he can like remember what these people were like, and in remembering them, he gives them life again. They are described somewhat autonomous. I mean, as automatons, meaning they don't have they're not that person reborn. They're his memory of them, and as his memory fades, he loses access to those Seraphon on the battlefield. This is actually really interesting because, if you kill a bloodletter, the energy goes back to Khorne and he doesn't care. But if you kill, say, a Slann on the battlefield who's a living thing, those memories are lost and those Seraphon can't come back. It makes the Slann himself a super important piece of the Age of Sigmar universe. Not only is he a force for good, he is also the record keeper of his section of that race, right? If you start losing Slann, you're losing Seraphon. You're losing memories of warriors past that are immensely important in the setting to come. We also know that they travel from realm to realm in their ships. We don't really have a good example as to how that happens. This is kind of one of the things that comes up when you talk about Age of Sigmar and how abstract it is. You talk about different realms of existence and the gates go between them, and that's cool, but where does spaceships fall into that? Like, is there gates in space too? Can this ship just go into space, deep space, and then like blink to a different one, then come back from deep space into a different realm? Lots of questions. We don't really have a good idea. I really hope that they go and flesh that out in the future, because it seems like everyone else is going through these these realm gates, but the Slann are the ones who are like, no, we're actually like astronauts, so it's just different enough to make you raise a lot of questions. Last thing that we know for certain is that these guys have a super tough grudge against Chaos. In fact, I think the idea is because their plans failed in the old world, their sole mission is we need to defeat Chaos by any means necessary. Slann are not very social creatures by nature. They don't really work alongside any other Order factions. I think there's perfectly good narrative reasons for them to fight other Order armies because they're so alien, right? I mean, they're not aliens or whatever, but they are so foreign in their thought process and their language and everything like that that there's tension there. But with that, their sole purpose is to defeat chaos. So if you're fighting chaos, they're probably going to help you out a bit and then just disappear because they don't care about you at all. They move the stars and track celestial events to find where the next chaos incursion is going to happen. They go there and just absolutely wreck face. They do all kinds of cool things like that. So at this point, we're going to switch into the different mode of the things that we don't know for sure. Things that when you're reading the battle tome for the first time, if you're very keen to pay attention to details, seem like conflicting things. Okay, here's an example. Do the summoned Seraphon fade away after a battle? It's a good question. There seems to be the idea that some of them are walking around the ship, but then it seems in some cases that they fade away. And my proposal is, one, this just adds mystery, right? Not knowing. But two, if they're drawn from memories, wouldn't it also make sense that they would stay as long as the Aslan was thinking about them? I mean, if you are Aslan and you are used to having people on your ship bustling around you and you have the energy, you would create people bustling around you and you would create life around you because that's kind of the mental state that you're in. Whereas after a battle, you don't need to see the big, massive hordes of armies, and so they would fade away. That's kind of my take on it. Some people were really not happy about the vagueness of that aspect, and I understand it. Going back to the vagueness of these starships, how do they move? How do they figure things out? How do they navigate different realms? How do they land and get back up? And we're not talking about needing science fiction level details here. We're just like, when you picture a Seraphon assault on a chaos thing, do they see the ship kind of like lurching from the sky slowly? Do everything just appear and drop down? I mean, there's narrative questions that are not, super in depth, trying to be a pain, that, if you wanted to recreate a cool assault on the tabletop, there's legitimate questions that are not answered in the battle tome about how these things look. And that pretty much ends my ideas of the Seraphon and what they are doing. Again, it's very, I don't want to say narrow in the sense, but they have a singular focus as an army, and that is to defeat chaos. The Slann fly around in separate ships. There's apparently a bunch of Slann, all coordinating their own armies, memories, celestial events, and they don't really work in groups, but they just go around the universe trying to foil Chaos's plans as much as possible. They don't necessarily work the best with other Aura armies, but they do have some things where they work alongside, because it's pretty obvious to tell who's Chaos and who's not. But and it kind of ends there. That's where the end of the relationship is. Seraphon are awesome because you can really unleash your hobby potential there. The old Aztec aesthetic is still on the models. However, Games Workshop has gone and done some really crazy out there color schemes on some of these things, and they look absolutely phenomenal. And I highly suggest you do a quick Google search for different schemes. You're going to be shocked by what you see. That you can really unleash your hobby potential, your palette. You can experiment with new colors, crazy things. Why? Because this is beings of pure energy formed from thousands and thousands of year-old memories. So, things get warped, things get weird, and it's really cool. It makes for some great hobbying, some great narrative. You can do all kinds of narrative things, like maybe this Slann has a problem with his memory, and so units will fade mid-game. You can do all kinds of cool narrative stuff like that, and it's a great army to really experiment in. And when you approach it from the idea of, this is an Age of Sigmar army that is based around mystery rather than it's an 8th edition army who doesn't tell us anything about Age of Sigmar, I think they fit into the universe much more now than they did when they were released. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to see the next lore video for your faction, leave it in the comments down below. We'll get right to it. I believe the next one in the queue is Fire Slayers, and then perhaps Iron Jaws after that. So if you want something besides those two, go ahead and leave it down below. If you haven't had a chance, look down below and you'll see the link to my web store. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that, so the way that I pay for my equipment and this channel is by people like you going to my store, buying anything. Amazon is the kind of fulfiller of my products. They'll take your payments and ship it to you. And for that, I get a small percentage, like an affiliate sale. And that directly goes to supporting me as a content producer to do more cool things for you. I am building a gaming table where we're going to be doing battle reports and things like that, very narrative heavy things. and I'm so looking forward to doing that, but I need support from my fan base to make that happen. Thank you all so much for watching. You've been so supportive, and happy wargaming.